guys, The Curious Owl here, and today I am bringing you my July 2018 wrap-up. So July was a crazy readathon month for me. I did not expect to end up partaking in 3 readathons over the course of July. One I am still currently in at the moment as it goes into the beginning of August, and I'm pretty proud of myself because I think I've read the most books in a month that I have in a very, very long time. I am also proud of myself because I think I have set myself a page record for the month, and I think I've read pretty much everything this month has been a physical book. I am currently reading one book though that's kind of mixing between using the audiobook and the physical book, just to kind of help myself out a little bit because I'm still kind of working through it. I will say I did not read all of the books I had intended to this month because for the Buy in the Bibliothon, I was not able to read all of the books that I wanted to read for the week, as typically with readathons, it's hard for me, I guess, to read a bunch during a week. I thought the summer was going to make it a lot easier on me. I think that's just how I am. I don't think I can, force myself ever to do 7 books in a week. It's just really difficult, and yet I am trying to do it again this week, but I'm not going to be forcing myself to get through the books. I think if I don't finish any of the books in this round, I will continue to read them over the next couple of months. There's still going to be books that are going to be on my immediate TBR, but there's just some books I couldn't get to because I didn't have the time and I didn't really want to expend the energy that I didn't have to read those books. But basically, I did end up finishing 8 books this month, and I did have one DNF that I was okay with DNFing because I really got through half of the book and I just ended up hating it. I felt like I wasn't getting anywhere with the book, and so I ended up DNFing it. But without further ado, let me get into some of the statistics for the month. So like I said, this month I read 8 books and 1 DNF'd, so I went through 9 books total, and I read all physical books this month. The ones that I finished, at least, were all physical books that I had on my shelf, so that was really awesome to be able to get through a lot of the books that were on my shelf. 2 of them were for the Tome Topple Readathon. 3 of them were read for the Biannual Bibliothon. 1 was read towards the end of the Biannual Bibliothon and just after. 1 was read after the Biannual Bibliothon. 1 was one of my reads for the Book2athon that is currently going on, as I finished it on the 31st. And finally, the last one was one of my Beautiful Creatures reread books for my reread series of the entire world of Beautiful Creatures. The amount of pages for this month I ended up reading was 3,423, which was absolutely astounding. The first book I finished this month was Renegades by Marissa Meyer, the first book in the Renegades trilogy. I fell in love with this book so much. I ended up using this as one of my reads for the Tome Topple Readathon that was going on at the end of June into the beginning of July, and I gave this book 5 out of 5 stars. I loved all the characters, I loved the world, I loved the plot that was involved with the story with 2 different perspectives going on, one good and one bad. I literally loved everything about this book. The second book I read for the Tome Topple was my DNF book, and that was Insomnia by Stephen King. I DNF'd this, like I said, about halfway through the book, and the reason was because I could not understand for the life of me what even the point of the story was supposed to be, because a lot of the story talks about this guy who loses his wife to cancer, and after he loses her, he starts to develop these strange abilities, coupled with the fact that he develops insomnia, and he basically starts to lose a little bit more sleep every day as time goes on, to the point where he can't even really sleep for more than maybe an hour and a half at a time before he wakes up again. And the thing is that along with his insomnia, like I said, he has these strange abilities that he can't figure out how he got, and then he finds out somebody else he knows has it, and this person in particular is going crazy because not only was he incredibly abusive to his wife, but he is basically trying to eliminate this women's center that performs abortions, and it's just this big cacophony of things that I just don't feel like made any sense to me, and that's why about halfway through the book I ended up DNFing it, and I was really disappointed because I'm trying to get into Stephen King. I've heard a lot of good things about a lot of his books, but this one was just not a good one for me. I really have no interest in going back to it anytime soon. The next book that I actually finished this month was The Wicked Deep by Shea Ernshaw. This was the group pick for the Biannual Bibliothon for the summer 2018 round. And I at first really, really loved this book. I had rated it like a 4.5 out of 5 stars originally when I first finished it. But then going back through and listening to other people talk about it and then kind of reflecting on my own thoughts of the story after having read it before the end of the Bibliothon, I had realized that this book really wasn't as good as I had originally thought and knocked it down to a 3 out of 5 stars. The reason was because I felt that the story was very, very rushed. It was less than 300 pages, and because of that, a lot of the book suffered. You don't learn a lot about, the story behind these sisters who come back every year to drown 3 young men. You don't know a lot. You don't really feel like the relationship between the main character and the love interest is real. You feel like it's very rushed kind of going through it, and I just don't feel like it was everything that it possibly could have been. And I think that if Shea Ernshaw had just really expanded it to its fullest potential, it would have turned out so much better. But I will say that there was a lot of great references or allusions essentially to both practical magic and Hocus Pocus that I truly enjoyed. I think that the atmosphere of the story was really, really good and really set up a great kind of idea for a story, but it just was very poorly executed and needed to be extended in order to be what it could have possibly been. The next book that I ended up finishing and fully loving was Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerri Maniscalco, the first book in the Stalking Jack the Ripper series. Oh my lord, did I love this book. This was another biannual Bibliothon challenge pick for me, which was to complete a book challenge that was off of somebody else's TBR from at any point in time. It didn't matter if it was an older Bibliothon or from just somebody's normal monthly TBR. It really didn't matter. But this one had been on my TBR for a long time, and I had picked it off of Emma Books' TBR from, I think, winter 2017. And I gotta say, I was nothing short of amazed about this book, because not only do we have a main character who is female studying forensic science, but we have a young woman who is studying forensic science in a time period that it was completely shunned against. And this is because the story takes place during the Jack the Ripper murders in London of 1888. And this story is really following Audrey Rose as she's trying to find out who Jack the Ripper is and bring him to justice. And it's just so good. Audrey is so witty. Thomas Cresswell, the double within this story, is hilarious, and he's a great counterpart to Audrey. And this book left me with such a happy feeling towards the end of it, because I was not only satisfied with the characters, but the historical accuracy and even the creative liberties that were taken within the story. The final book that I finished during the biannual Bibliothon was Shadow and Bone by Leigh Bardugo, the first book in the Grisha trilogy. This book essentially is a high fantasy dealing with a girl named Alina Starkov who finds out that she is what's called a Grisha, where she basically has magical abilities, and she is what is known as a sun summoner, where she's able to use the powers of the sun to her advantage. And she's never known she's had this ability before, and when she does find out about it, this kind of commander called the Darkling takes her away to have her train her magic. But she's not sure if what she's being trained for is completely good. And along with all of this, she has a huge crush on her best friend that she is trying to deal with and trying to make sense of, that really starts to kind of cloud her abilities and cloud her judgment throughout the story. I truly enjoyed this novel. I also gave this a 5 out of 5 stars because I really thought that this was a wonderful debut for a series, because it was so impactful. I really truly loved Alina, and I understand now why so many people hate the Darkling, and I think it's a great start to anyone who is getting to go into high fantasy, because it's simple enough to get you started with it, but it's still very complex to get you to understand what are some of the most important elements within high fantasy. Also, Shadow and Bone was my pick for picking 3 books to read a chapter from and picking a book that seemed the most interesting to you from those 3. The next book I completed was another pick for me for the biannual Bibliothon, but I did not finish it until the day afterward, and it was Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants by Ann Brashares, the first book in the Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants series. This was my challenge pick for reading something that's been on your TBR for at least a year, because this has been on my TBR for probably closer to 10 years, because I remember so many people having read this when I was in like late elementary, early middle school, and really enjoying it. But I gotta say, I was severely disappointed with this story. I ended up giving it a 2 out of 5 stars, and the biggest thing was that I felt each of the girls was incredibly contrived, and I think that the problem is that this book does not age well. This is a 2000s contemporary that does not fit 2018 kind of parameters, if you will, because a lot of the things within this novel are things that I don't think would be seen anymore 10, 15 years later after this book has been published. I just feel like this book really let me down because I have higher expectations now based on my current contemporary reading, that I just left this book with a very poor taste in my mouth. The next book that I completed is completing the main series of the Beautiful Creatures reread that I am doing, and that was Beautiful Redemption by Kami Garcia and Margaret Stohl. This is the last book in the main series, but there are 5 other novellas I would like to read, as well as 2 spin-off novels within the world that I want to read. So this is concluding the main series only. There will be more reviews coming out about, the 4 prequel novellas, a prequel novella to a spin-off series, and then the 2 spin-off novels that are created within this world. Being the end of a series, a book has a hard time with really making a satisfying ending a lot of times, but I will say Beautiful Redemption did not let me down in the slightest. I ranked it 4 out of 5 stars, and mostly the problem I had was that I feel like the bad guys within this entire world were not completely fleshed out, and I felt like their plan just was not really clear to me. I feel like there could have been a little bit more time taken to develop this overall plan they had that was kind of in the background of the entirety of the series, as it plays a really big role in the reason as to why Ethan is kind of in this afterlife aspect that he is involved with in this book, as the final book basically is taking place after the end of Beautiful Chaos, where Ethan sacrifices himself to fix the order of things, and in Beautiful Redemption, he is trying to find his way to come back to the surface in order to right some wrongs that were done to him, as he did not necessarily have to be killed in order to fix the order of things, and he finds out as to why. But I feel like the plan between the bad guys was not clearly stated, and it really made me upset because I don't feel like it clearly justified why Ethan was in the other world in the first place. Next, I completed To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han. This was a pick that I had for the Biennial Bibliothon for the challenge of picking an own voices book that was different from me, as this is about a Korean-American young woman written by a Korean-American author. And this book basically is about a girl named Laura Jean who writes these letters to boys that she has crushes on but never sends them out. And then they get sent out, and she kind of has to pick up the pieces from that. There is a Netflix movie coming out in about 3 weeks on August 17th, I believe, and I'm so excited because this book made me so happy. This is a rom-com that I would actually be willing to watch, and I absolutely hate rom-coms. So that is saying a lot, I would think. This book was funny, it was sad, it had great romantic involvement within it. It had a lot of amazing talk about anxiety and depression, and also different ideas about, family and relationships and kind of things that you wouldn't expect a lot of contemporaries to do and still remain super light and fluffy. And this was absolutely amazing. I feel like it was completely balanced throughout the entire thing, and I basically rated it a 5 out of 5 stars because I just fell in love with the entire story, and I need to get my hands on P.S. I Still Love You, now. And finally, the last book that I finished during the month of July is a book that is actually one of my challenge books for the Booktubeathon, for the challenge of picking a book that you would like to do yourself, and that is The Sun and Her Flowers by Rupi Kaur. I haven't reviewed this yet, but I will be coming out with a review once the Booktubeathon is over. My general thoughts, though, it was okay. Some of the poems were really good. I really had a lot of good feelings from some of them, whether it was being sad or happy or whatever. But the formatting was really, really poor. I do not like how this book was formatted. I don't like how some of the things were organized. I just didn't like the way that it looked. But the poems themselves were actually pretty good. But this was, like I said, for the challenge of picking a book that involves something that you would like to do, as I would like to write poetry. I'm currently working on a poetry book that is involved with poems about people in my life that have really shaped who I am today. And so I've gotten a lot of inspiration, I think, in writing style from Rupi Kaur that I would like to try to implement myself. But it was going to take practice. But it was something that I had been wanting to read for a long time. And now I'm actually interested in reading Milk and Honey, since that is her first collection, and this is the second one, and I have not read Milk and Honey. I am currently in the middle of 3 other books. 2 of them are for the Booktubeathon, and one was my random TBR pick for July, but I didn't have the time to really read it, so I'm kind of transferring it to my August TBR instead. So the 2 books that I am currently reading for the Booktubeathon are The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware, which is for the challenge of picking a book through a coin toss. This was the winner of the coin toss. And also The Help by Kathryn Stockett, which is counting for the challenge of reading a book and watching the movie adaptation of it. I'm actually not going to watch the movie adaptation as I've already seen it, so I know pretty much everything that is within the movie adaptation. And where I'm at right now, which is not very far into this book, the movie seems to have really done justice to the book, but time will tell with the further I get into the book. And the other book that I'm currently reading that was my July TBR random pick that is now my August random TBR pick is City of Ashes by Cassandra Clare. I'm actually kind of going back and forth with reading the physical book and the audiobook version of it because I listen to the audiobook version of it while I'm at the gym, and it's really helpful because it kind of breaks up the monotony of reading all the physical books that I'm going through, especially since I'm trying to get through all my Booktubeathon books. So I'm kind of bouncing back and forth between the two, but this is another current read. It's just going to take a lot more time, I think, for me to get through it, considering I'm not spending as much time with it as I am with my Booktubeathon books. So there you guys go. Those are all the books that I ended up finishing or, going through at least in July of 2018. If you guys did enjoy this video, please do give it a big thumbs up. And if you're not already and you'd like to be, hit that button down below and subscribe to become an owlet in our flock. And I will see all of you guys in my next video. Bye, guys.